This is a 2019 Fiat Ducato 2.3 and I'm just about to change the timing belt and the water pump. So there's lots of videos online about this, quite a few aren't in English. So I haven't done this video before, so I'm not going to do a complete tutorial on how to do this because I'm working it out as I go along based on some of the points in these other videos. But what I'm going to do is just share some of the things I've found and some of the things which I think you do need to do and don't need to do. So this will really just be lots of snippets as I go along, and I'll try to make it into some sort of helpful video. So far I've taken the liner out and then the plastic tray that sits at the bottom there. 90% of the viewers of this channel are not subscribed. I'm sorry to ask, but it would help greatly if you would. Just press the subscribe button. It's free and it shows YouTube you like this sort of vehicle related content. If you want to be notified when new videos are released, please click on the bell button also. Thank you, it really helps more than you would imagine. I've then also taken this hose out, but what the other videos don't tell you is these clips that hold the hoses on are single use only, so you have to cut them off. But you need to buy in some stainless steel Jubilee clips, and I'll list in the video description below the sizes which I had to buy, but they're pretty big ones. So next I've got the coolant bottle out, as you can see, and finally that stopped dripping. So that's quite a challenge. So what a lot of people are saying is you've got to get this bracket out. I'm wondering whether you really do need to, because there's quite a lot of clearance there, but possibly it's because you've got to undo that mount, but I could still do that with this bracket in place. So I am wondering whether you do need to do this bit, because getting this bracket out is a lot more difficult than it looks, because you've also got to take the windscreen washer bottle out, and that's what's the noise has been, because I've been draining it from this hose. I siphoned it off. So this is the rubber hose which goes up here to the nozzle. So I've undone it there. The clip broke as soon as I touched it there, which is a shame. But there's a lot of water in here, so this was heavy, so I've been siphoning it out. It looks like this is just one of those mountings like this where the plastic pushes through a sort of rubber grommet to secure it. There is a bracket here, that's nice and easy to get to. Two 10mm nuts. You've got to take your electrical connection out, but I think I can then hopefully get this bottle out without taking this hose off, because again there's a clip that you'll have to destroy to get off. But all of this has got to come out just to get to the back bracket for this, because that, it looks like that's mounted underneath the washer bottle. So it's a lot of work just to get this out. And then you've got your powered steering bottle here. Again, that goes through on a rubber grommet. If there's anything on the end of that, no, there's not. So that is just a bolt there. Hopefully, yeah, that will pry out there nice and easily. These were a bit of a challenge to get out. I ended up using a lever to lever them out. And then this could then be tied up out the way, because you don't really want to be disconnecting those hoses. And then you can get this out. So I'll probably continue to get this out, because I've drained the bottle and I've taken so much out now, I might as well continue. But it's whether this washer bottle can actually come out, because it's going to have to do that and twist and come up. Otherwise you've got more hoses to disconnect. But it's a lot of work just to get to the point of getting that out. And obviously the other thing I've forgotten is I've taken the headlight out. That was nice and easy. There's just two fixings on the headlight. The connector at the back, that had a grey locking thing, which you just pull the grey plastic out and then the connector comes out. Often these electrical connectors are quite challenging like that, when each one you come to is slightly different to work out how to release it. But anyway, let's crack on. So to get this bottle out, it is just held on underneath, which you'll be able to see. It pushes through that, where am I? There. Pushes through that rubber grommet there. So to release that, You just got to get your hands under the bottle here and pull up quite hard, and then the neck is held on the metal at the back there, and that you just really need some right angle pliers like this to get behind there, squeeze the clip, pull it, and then you can release that neck, and then it will come out like that. So I can see now I've got this out. There were 2 lugs at the bottom in those rubber grommets holding that down. So that's why I did struggle with that, but you certainly really need to drain the water out of it first. And then all of that just to get to that bolt there. So getting this bracket out, you've got a bolt there. You've got a nut there. And then the final one is this one. And you don't want to make the mistake I've been making when I've been trying to get that nut off there. But actually that's welded to the bracket. But the welds are absolutely minuscule and I couldn't see them. So I was really struggling to undo that one. But you've got to do it from underneath. And it's that one there. 13mm, and then you can take that out, but I'm still not sure whether that was really needed, but it will certainly make it easier. Yeah, I guess it's going to be a bit of a pig to get to some of this. You can get to this easier, but these power steering hose here is a bit awkward. But anyway, what I'll do is I'll tie that up there, or no, that'll probably be okay just resting there. So that's pretty much access side of it done. To get the air conditioning belt off here, which is this tooth belt, I didn't remove the air conditioning compressor or the bolts, because then you've got to hang it on the hoses, which I don't think is a good idea. So what I did with a 19mm spanner, got on that nut, turned it while pulling the belt off the pulley here, and keep turning it, and you can stretch it across here and it will come off. And looking at this belt, where was it? It did say stretchy belt. So I guess that's why it doesn't have a tensioner at all on here, because the belt stretches and keeps itself taut. So next, got to get the drive belt out from there. But it's just ridiculous the access you get. So from the top, we've got the engine mount in the way that stops us seeing it. So people are removing this engine mount to drop the engine a little bit to get the bolts out of this pulley. However, I'm wondering whether we can do that without dropping the engine. Because we don't need to remove the centre bolt, we've got to remove the small bolts around the outside, the 4 bolts. And I think you can just about get the lower ones without dropping the engine down. I haven't tried yet, but it looks doable. So at the moment, I haven't taken that engine mount off. But that's all you've got to drop the engine for, is just to get this pulley off. But first off, got to get that drive belt off. So you get this cut out in the inner wing here, but the belt starts here and goes off all around here. So there's just no access from the top or the side. But then when laying underneath, you can just about see it, but my God, the access is awkward. And you've got to take note of how it goes around each pulley and its path. So we've got to get something on the tensioner up there, and then try to get this belt off. It's incredibly awkward. So I can see why people take the front bumper off, because the amount of times I've hit my head on that sharp corner getting in and out there is getting very annoying. So laying underneath, 15mm socket on an extension bar, pushing towards the rear of the vehicle. You can then release the tension on that tensioner and then start hooking the belt off. So that's the belt out. I've also got the air conditioning belt off here. So the next step is this pulley has to be removed, because the timing case cover goes underneath this pulley. So we've got to remove that. And this is why people are dropping the engine. However, we've just got to get those 4 outer bolts out, and they look like they are 12mm. But as you can see, you can get a bar in there just fine. This isn't getting in the way. So I don't know why people are dropping the engine. Actually, that might be 11mm. Anyway, I'll confirm on the screen. But I'm going to remove that bolt, get something on the inner one, spin this round to get all the bolts at the bottom, and I reckon that this can easily come off without taking the engine mount off. So these bolts are 11mm, not 12mm. And I've got one out, and then all you need is a 19mm spanner on the centre bolt. Turn that around until you get the next bolt down at the bottom, and you can get them out okay. So that's all the 4 bolts out. I've done this as well without the belt on, so there's no tension. So this does slip a little bit, but you can just punch your ratchet and they will crack off without it slipping too much, so it's not an issue at all. The vehicle's in neutral as well. And if you use the 1/4 inch drive with this thinner socket extension bar, then you'll be able to get it a little bit straight as well. But anyway, that's out, and this pulley is loose already. So it comes off. Okay, but how do you get it out? So while you don't need to drop the engine, you do need to push the engine that way. Oh God, just nothing is straightforward with this job. So maybe that's why you got to drop the engine, because looking there, there's another bit of metal there. It's only 1.5 mm, but that's what's stopping this coming out. So maybe dropping the engine down a little bit might allow that out, because as it is at the moment, that pulley is not coming off. So I've now got a jack under the sump, and got to remove these 3 engine mount nuts and then 3 bolts on that side. So these are all 18mm, and because we're lowering the engine, I guess you actually only need to take those 3 out, because the engine's going to be dropping down. You don't necessarily need to take these out unless you want to remove the whole engine mount completely. I have slackened all these off, because then we've got a bit of play, because when you bring the engine back up, these have obviously got to line up perfectly. But these studs, by looks of it, are welded onto the body, and I've sprayed WD-40 on these, but these are pretty rusty. So if these are looking a bit dodgy, you certainly don't want to be breaking them. So yeah, it looks like you actually only need to remove those 3 to allow the engine to drop down, but only a fraction. So I've just had a thought actually. It's probably a good idea to loosen these at least on the mounting bracket, because then you can check that you're taking the weight of the engine on your jack, because you could jack it up slightly and just see whether you're increasing the gap here, because then you're not putting all of this under too much tension. So I've taken those 3 bolts out and just loosened these, because I then made sure the engine was supported, and with those 3 bolts out, you can see now that's how much I've dropped the engine, which is the thickness of my index finger, and that was enough then to get this pulley out. So I've put those 3 bolts back in, this one nipped up tighter than the rest. I might regret that later. I'm not sure whether this engine needs to be lowered again to access any of the timing belt. I don't think it does, but anyway, next job is to remove this cover. So when undoing the 10mm headed bolts to take this cover off, the bolts don't come all the way out. They've obviously got a clip on the other side which stops the bolts coming out. However, there's one down there which you can't get to. So looking from underneath, the cover's all loose, but the last bolt is just there beside that pulley, and you can just about get in there to get that one out. So that's all the bolts out. The cover's loose, but this pulley is in the way. Looks like the cover's cut around that pulley. It's got a bit of a curve on it. Why they did cut it down that one, I don't know. It's just, everything is just awkward, and it doesn't help, there's just such little space. So next job is to get that pulley off. And then to get the cover off, you just need to pop the top cover off, because this lip is blocking it there. And then down here you've got this pipe on this bit of plastic, and there's a little lug there you need to push down with a screwdriver, and it then slides through this slot here. So that releases it from there, and then do lots of wiggling, but it's still caught down there somewhere. So next, this pulley has got to be removed, because as you can see, when I move the plastic casing, it's turning that pulley. And if I put my fingers up round here, there's plastic going up round behind it. Such a ridiculous design. There's just such little clearance in here to get to all of this. You can't get to it really from the top because your engine mount is in the way. Would have helped if they'd put some holes here. I was just looking at this. There is a plastic cover there, but nothing on the other side. This is double skin. So if that followed through all the way to the other side and lined up with the bolts holding the pulleys, it'd be great. But of course it doesn't. Yeah, solid metal on this side. It's just ridiculous. So that's the tensioner off. That's a 13mm head, and as I said, there's not much clearance. So if you end up putting a socket on this, within a few turns of getting this out, the socket then gets jammed against this metalwork. So you've just got to get it finger loose and then use your fingers. It's very awkward. But now this cover should now come off. Even just removing this plastic cover is awkward. There's such little space for the cover to come off and then drop down, because it's hitting this metal rail here. It is just so tight for space. But I've seen online, looking at other videos, this drops out the bottom, but it's not going anywhere easily. Right, air conditioning pressure is going to stop that coming out. Oh dear, I didn't want to remove that because of the hoses here, but it looks like that has got to be removed unless I could get this pulley off, because the plastic is, oh no, the body is going to be in the way as well, probably. Right, so if your van hasn't got air conditioning, you're not going to have that, and it's going to be easier. But yeah, that isn't going to allow the timing cover to move unless there is a way of getting it out the top. No, the engine mount gets in the way. God, you can see I'm getting frustrated with this. So, with a bit of wiggling, I have got it out the top, but unless I take all the windscreen scuttle off, I can't actually get it out. I can get it so close, but that's probably enough for me to do the rest of the job. It would be nice to get this out of the way, but just so I can show you what I'm trying to do, it's either leave that there and do the timing belt with that cover there, or take the air conditioning compressor off, which I really don't want to do, or take this off, but that involves removing the wiper arms. That's not an issue, but usually there's plastic clips holding these and they break, so I don't really want to be touching more plastic bits. But or remove this, but that's metal work under there, so I'm not going to gain anything there. So yeah, I can't make any more space. Isn't it just ridiculous how they don't design in space for all of this stuff? Anyway, I'll keep wiggling to see whether there's a way of getting that out, but of course then I've also got to remember how I did it to get it back in. Well, I can't get that out, but I've got it at that position, getting the bottom hooked up round under that cowling, and that gives me enough room to work on the timing belt now. So that's all I can really do today. I'm not going to take the timing belt off just yet, because I've also bought one of those locking pin sets, which I will link in the video description below. That was only about £12 or so off eBay, and that gives you a locking pin to go at the bottom in that one, and then there's a couple in the cam at the top. So they're turning up in the post tomorrow, and the timing kit, I bought a Gates one, again I'll link below. That was only 150 quid for the belt, water pump, idler pulley, tensioner, and then 3 O-rings. So I thought I'll just recap what I've taken off today, because I've put it all here in the trailer. So inner wheel arch liner, the plastic tray at the bottom, the headlight. You've got to take this off the top of the dash to access the coolant bottle, the windscreen washer bottle. You've got to take all those out to get the bracket out. Taking this hose off, and then this pulley, these two, your 2 drive belts. So yeah, that lot so far, just to get to the timing belt. So obviously you're going to need some coolant for this job as well. So far that much has come out. So you'll need some coolant, and for the Ducato you need OAT coolant. So I bought this one, Poma, ready to use, red. So this matches the Fiat spec. There's also another one you can use, which I'll put all the details in the video description below. Another common one, I think it was G30 from memory, and also the G12 Plus. But anyway, this one was cheaper, and actually Amazon I found was cheaper than the local motor factors. So I've got 5 litres of ready mixed here, but looking at what I've got in the bucket, I may well need to buy another one of those. So this van has only done 24,000 miles. I've had it since new, and it seems crazy to me that I'm changing a timer belt at such low mileage. But the service intervals are every 5 years, so it needs to be done, and I'm actually trying to sell it as well, so people are going to expect it to be done. So look inside the plastic timing cover here. You can see there's quite a lot of brown dust, and that's coming off the belt. But the belt looks in good condition, as you'd expect at 24,000 miles. So with a bit more trying, I've managed to get this out by moving the powered steering bottle to the other side of this hose. It then gave me that little bit more room. Still took a lot of wiggling, get that up there, and now got this cover out, so I'm quite pleased. So I can give this a good wash, and then in 5 years time, when someone else is doing this job, they're not going to see extra amount of dust in there making the belt look worse than it really is. So for the first time now, I can properly see the timing belt. So I am quite pleased I removed the cradle holding the coolant bottle, because that now gives a lot more space here to get the water pump out, and got to get that idle pulley out down there as well. It's always advisable as well, take pictures of all of this and the drive belts that I've previously taken off, because then it gives you a better idea how to put it all back on, and then you know which side of some of these that the belts go round. Just makes it a lot easier. If you're doing this job, it's well worth just buying the proper timing toolkit, the locking pin set. This is only about £12.79, I think this one was, and I'll put the links to these kits in the video description below. I purchased the Gates timing belt kit. This is model KP15592XS. Again, the links are all in the video description below. And in it you get the timing belt, of course. Gates used to be a very good brand of belt, so that's why I chose this kit. You get a new tensioner pulley, you get an idler pulley, and this is the mounting plate for that pulley. And then this is the water pump, and it comes with 3 O-rings, and then the mounting bolt for that pulley. Using a 19mm spanner and a ratchet one is ideal for this job. There's not enough space to get a socket in there, but you can turn the engine round until you get the top pulley with that hole lined up with the hole at the back, and you can see the mark there on the inside edge of the pulley is just off 12 o'clock, like 12:05. And then looking down below, we've got the mark on the lower pulley is at 9 o'clock. And then we can take this torque screw out to put the lower timing pin in. And that, it's a T50 Torx. And it comes out like that. So we can lock that up at the bottom using the longest pin out of the kit with the sliding bit on the shaft there, but it doesn't go in. So this is why, another reason why you need to drop the engine, because this needs to be dropped down just a little bit to allow it to go in, because this is in the way, going in too higher angle. So that's a pain. I've got to take that engine mount off again. It actually didn't need much. I've still got the 3 bolts in here, and I've just dropped it by, what's that, about 8mm or so. So the bolts are still in, as you can see. They're still finger loose as well. So that's enough to get the locking pin in at the bottom there. So I did struggle a little bit to get this in. I had it in the right place. I put a spanner on here and wiggled it around a bit, and you can feel this pin slide in, but this has got some flats on the end, on the point at the end of the pin there are flats, and I was turning this and it just wasn't going in further enough for the thread to get into the hole there. But it took about 5 minutes of keep wiggling this, and eventually I turned this and I felt it slide in. And then you can do this up, and now that is all locked in tight. You can't move this backwards or forwards, and you can't do that up any tighter. So it didn't slide in straight away. It was about 5 minutes of wiggling to get that into its position. And then next you take this one out of the kit, which is the simple straight pin, and that will then lock through the grey pulley into the casting at the back like that. So there are these 2 pins in the set, which you can lock off the crank at the top of the engine. Obviously we've got to get this cover off, but I'm wondering whether you really need to. A lot of videos they don't, they just use those 2. And in my mind, that's locked off enough. You know, do you really need to lock the crank off at the top if this top pulley is locked off with that pin? But anyway, they make them for a reason, and they supply them in the timing kit for this engine. So I'm going to whip off the cover and have a look, see whether I can find them. First off, I've just got to get this clip undone to release the cover from that hose. But getting that cover off isn't easy. It's snapped on at this end, there and there, that's easy, but there's at least one at this end, but you can't get your hands in there to lift it up. I can just about get my hand in there, but I've got no force to pop that up. All of this lot is in the way. Something so simple is so challenging. Right, so I've got that out by getting one hand down there, one hand down there, lifting up. But I've now noticed there's the 2 clips on that side, but this one is at the end. So actually that cover could have just pulled off like that. But of course you don't realise these things until you see the underside. So with that exposed, we can then see where these other locking pins go, and it is back here. There's one there and one down in there, and they've got Allen key heads, and you can't get to them. So I don't think I'm going to bother, but to get to those you would have to take this lot off, and there's an awful lot of hoses on here. I don't know whether if I undo that how much of this will move. It's actually in line about here. I might as well have a go while we've got this far. So I've given up trying to get all of this off. There's 2 nuts there, but this bracket goes all up under there and all up round here. It's holding this lot at the back as well. There's 2 self-tapping screws holding this scuttle to the white plate here. There is a nut, or sorry, a bolt there, but that's only holding the air intake on. That's not going through the supporting bracket of this lot. And then I've seen up in there, there is a nut at the back there. But I would struggle to undo that. And ideally, your scuttle's got to come off to get to that. So I'm not prepared to do that today. So I'm going to leave all of this in place and not bother locking at those 2 points at the top of the engine. So next, got to get this pulley off to get the water pump off. So before I take the belt off, I'm going to undo the centre nut, and that's 22mm, and there is a washer on there as well. And you are going to need some M8 bolts to put into that pulley to then pull the pulley off. So I'm just going to put these in by hand, but not pull it off yet, because obviously I need to take the belt off first. Just one little point, there's no white lines, marker lines on the original timing belt, so no point looking for those. And then the next step with a 13mm spanner is to release the pressure on the tensioner, and then we can then get the belt off. And remember to photograph the path of the belt first. So I was wrong, this original belt does have the white lines on it, but it's in very good condition still. So as I said, this van's only done 24,000 miles, but it's 5 years old, and the service schedule for these timing belts is every 4 to 5 years, depending on how hard a life the van has got. But looking around this belt, there is no sign of wear at all, no cracking, and this has clearly got a lot of life in it yet. But you don't want one of these to snap. But when I compare the new belt here with the old belt, this is more flexible. I've measured the thickness of the belt at the lowest part between the teeth, and they're both the same. But if I had both of these belts in my hand and had to choose which belt to put on the vehicle, based on flexibility, I would probably want to put the old belt on. This belt does feel softer, doesn't feel like it's not going to last as long. But anyway, there we go. That's what I'm going to fit. So next, we can take off this by doing up the bolts, which then just push this pulley off, and then that gives us the clearance to take the water pump off. Because this one is being replaced, because a new one comes in the kit, I'm going to take this off first. This was a 13mm bolt, but this is still spinning lovely and smooth. So again, because this is such low mileage, none of this is actually worn. So on the original one, there was a little O-ring there on the bolt holding it all together, and then this cup, or whatever you call it, goes into the back of the bearing like that. I just noticed the original bearing has a C-clip holding that bearing in, whereas the new one there isn't, so this is just a push fit bearing. So this is still nice and smooth. And it's exactly the same as the new one. So no wear on this yet, but you'd expect that after only 24,000 miles. So the next job is to take all the bolts out holding the water pump in, and they are all different lengths apparently. So as I take them out, I'm going to drop them into the new one, and then take out the old water pump, transfer the bolts over, and then when I put this one into the vehicle, I can then individually put the bolts back in the right holes. So the kit comes with 3 O-rings. Obviously your large one goes in the base behind the water pump here, and then you have 2 others, a grey and a black one, and they're both the same size. However, the grey one is possibly a bit thicker. Anyway, on other YouTube videos I've seen people say different things about these, and a lot of them they throw one of them away. But looking at the Continental video, what they say is the grey one goes around there, and the black one is then for your fuel pump, which goes here. However, when you look at the fuel pump here, there's no O-ring on this, and this is all original. So does that go in that gap there in the little groove? I assume it does, but there wasn't one originally. I assume that goes like that. But they provide 3 O-rings for a reason, and all of these timing kits for the Ducato have 3 O-rings, with 2 being the same size. So yeah, it's there for a reason, but why there wasn't one originally when the engine is made new, I don't know. I'm just going to smear a little bit of red rubber grease just around all 3 O-rings so they don't get pinched when I clamp this back up into position. Getting this water pump back in place is a bit of a struggle because the fuel pump, I guess this is a fuel pump anyway, that's got to be pushed through the casing, and it's all got to be square as well. So what I found is I just put it up close and then just gently put the 10mm bolt in at the top, and that just stops it then falling. And then from underneath I got my hand behind the fuel pump, and I was able to squeeze the fuel pump and the casing together. I did also grease, not sure whether you can see there, I did also grease around the flange to allow that to get in a bit easier. But once I'd snapped those two together, the whole thing went into its place properly, and you felt it engage down here. So at this point I can now put the bolts back in. And I believe these are all torqued up to 35 Newton meters, maybe a bit less for this 10mm one. But I guess you're going to want to do it in some sort of uniform order and not torque them up as you put them in. Get them all in and do them up evenly so this goes on straight, and in particular this pump is then all squared up before you torque the bolts up. Using a deep 13mm 1/4 inch socket is quite handy for doing this job. So I put this new idler pulley in. You torque this up to 35 Newton meters. I've put this original pulley back on. This will need tightening up, but I can't do that until the belt is on. I'm not sure yet what the torque is on that, but anyway, I'll come back to that one. And I've put the new tensioner in, and this is still just loose because we need to get the belt on. So that's the next job, is to put the belt back on. And then when you're putting your timing belt back on, if you can get the white mark on the belt on the tick on the pulley there, and the same with the one at the bottom, you know you got it all right. So I've just noticed as well there's some arrows on the timing belt here, which I guess is the direction of flow. So I'm not sure whether this is turning that way or that way. I guess that way, so I probably need to flip the belt round. Yeah, I need to work out which way round that is spinning. Anyway, that's something else you need to bear in mind. So I've got the belt on the other way around now, and you can see I put a bit of red felt tip pen where the white line is there, so I can see it from this side. So that's on the mark on that pulley. Putting the belt on from this way round, going round the system up to the top, and at the top you can see the white line there lines up with a little mark there on that top pulley. And as for the direction, I saw in other videos they had the arrows here pointing to the front of the vehicle, but when I turn the belt round to get these two to line up, the arrows are now down at the bottom. They're just under that tensioner pulley actually. But the other way, of course, is I could have put the belt on, taken the timing pins out, and then cranked the engine over, and then I would have seen which direction this all turns. But I didn't want to do that because that's quite a bit of work, and then if you get it wrong, you've then got to line all the timing up and get the pins out and drop this again, and it's all just an awful lot of work. So next job is to get these pulleys tightened up and then sort out that tensioner. It was a bit of a challenge to get the pulley over the water pump here, and I guess this is rounded on the water pump pulley to assist to sort of push the belt over that, but it was too tight. So what I ended up doing was just taking it off here, getting it round there, and then just sort of pulling this belt up so I could make sure that the white line was on the correct one here, because naturally it wanted to be one notch over. But that was the easiest way, was to manipulate it onto this larger pulley rather than the water pump, even though that looked like that should be the easy one because it's a smooth edged and it's got a taper edge. But anyway, that was quite tight to put on, even though I've turned the tension around and there's no tension on there yet. So next, got to tighten up the tensioner, and you actually over tighten it initially, and then rotate the engine 8 times, and then slacken it off slightly. But all the videos show this job with the engine out of the vehicle. So you're looking straight on that way, and you can see the spot and the marks on the tensioner. But of course, when it's in your vehicle, you've got no access to look that way because all this metalwork's in the way. So quite how are you meant to see the marks down there to get that right? I'm not sure. So back down from below, it is a bit more visible actually, it's not too bad. So we've got to over tighten this initially. So back down from below, it actually is visible. So the next job is tightening up this tensioner. So you need an Allen key in here, turning it anti-clockwise, and you've got a little spot in there and you want to tighten it past that. So you want to turn that round, which I can't do one-handed while holding the phone because I'm using my wrong hand here, but we've got to turn this anti-clockwise, get the little spot in the back plate beyond the mark in the front plate, tighten it up with a 13mm spanner on there, and then rotate the engine 8 times after taking the locking pins out, of course. And then when you've done that, you can then slacken this off slightly by tightening it so the little spot is just visible in the nick on the front plate there. But anyway, other videos show you how to do that better because of course they do it all with the engine out of the vehicle. So before I do the rotation, I just need to make sure I've torqued everything up. So as for the torques, this is 90 Newton meters, but I haven't touched this. A lot of instructions say you need to slacken this to get the belt on. I haven't found that. The idler pulley, 35 Newton meters. The tensioner is 35 Newton meters, but I'm going to torque that up properly when I've rotated the engine 8 times to get the belt to settle in. The fuel pump here, as far as I can see, it's referred on other videos as a 90 Newton meter torque, which seems rather high to me, but most of the time the torque's based on the diameter of your bolt. So 90 Newton meters for that one, 90 Newton meters for that one. I've seen others that said 35. So a lot of these get it wrong, and I've searched and searched and I can't find any official documentation online that shows the torques for that. So anyway, I'm going to try it at 90 and see what it's like. So that's the next thing to do, torque it all up and then take the locking pins out and also put that screw back in where the lower locking pin comes out. And I'll put some fresh Loctite on that before I put that in. So rotating this engine 8 full revolutions is really hard work, and I'm using a 19mm relatively short ratchet spanner because I couldn't get my socket on there with a ratchet or a long bar that would give me more leverage. So that and the extra tight tensioner is making it really hard work. And then what you also want to do is, while you're doing this, is just to make sure the belt is correctly on the pulleys and sort of just tease it in a bit as it's going round to centralize that up. And then when you've done all that, you need to then set your tensioner using the 10mm Allen key in there. Turn this round until the little indentation is in the tick, in the little cutout in the plate, and then do this up to 35 Newton meters, and that sets the correct tension on the belt there. So now it's just a case of putting everything back together, doing it all in reverse, starting with putting the timing cover in, wiggling that back into position, which was a bit of fun. So I've got it all back together, coolant going back in, headlights back, and everything is back in place. the most difficult part of all of this actually is putting that auxiliary drive belt back on. And then under here it was getting the tensioner pulley and the other pulley above it in, because there's just such little space in here. But I've got this wrong. There's too much slack on the belt, even though it's tight at the top. And I've checked and double checked this, but it's squealing. So there's a lot of tension on the top, but not on the bottom. So I've got to look at that again. The air conditioning belt here is on, that's fine. That you just stretch over this. But yeah, this is the worst thing of all the job. The worst part of it is working up in there. It is just so tight. But anyway, I'll have another go at that tomorrow, and then all I've got to do is put the inner wheel arch liner back in the plastic tray there, put the wheel back on, and the job's done. So I've got this sorted now, and I've got some proper tension on this belt. I had the belt the wrong side of this tensioner, even though where I had it, it was swinging back and putting tension on the belt. It wasn't putting tension in the right place. So I found putting a 50mm socket in a long bar on there, but when you start with your bar here, you can only get up to the drive shaft here, and it was a bit awkward. So I found getting the bar right up in here, you've got more of a swing on it, and that finally pulled this around enough to get the belt in the right place. So that's all nice and taut everywhere and on correctly. So in the video description below, I'll put links to the products I've used and other information like your torque settings, and also other videos I've used for reference, and also any other relevant information that I think you would find useful if you're going to undertake the cam belt change on a Fiat Ducato. So if you've liked this video or found it useful, please do click the thumbs up, because that really does help, helps other people find the channel, and I'll see you on the next one.